Good evening. Tonight is the last night before I take my Halloween break, and it is also the last night you get to see me in this form. I hope you're all doing wonderful on this Halloween Eve, the week of, or should I say, the week before. For those who may not know me, I am Ricky T. Bones. Indeed. I'm going to be very low-key for this because, I don't know, I kind of want to be relaxing for once. I feel like I'm very agitated most times, or I'm very excited, so something with just my fireplace in the background, a couple of good books to read, something nice and chill for the spooky season. At least, I hope I'm audible when I am this quiet. Rad, thank you, Mims. The internet should be stable. There's been a couple of interesting demons haunting my ISP, but they should be ironed out. So, welcome as always to Mimsies, to Tony, my wonderful artist who has given me all this shit for free. How dare you? First off. When we come back after break, there will be a new me, but for now, I'm not the focal point of this stream. Y'all don't even know what's coming. Nope. It's going to be a 1-2 punch with what we're doing behind the scenes. But yes, for those who may not know me, for the millionth time, I am a singer, songwriter eventually. I do music over on YouTube and VTubing stuff over here. And I like to think myself an okay voice actor. I don't know if I am a good one. I'll let you decide that after tonight. Because I will be reading live, out loud, excerpts from Edgar Allen Poe, Tim Burton, and some old Texas folklore I found digging through my father's library. Yeah, I know. So yes. Maybe make some tea, some nice relaxing non-caffeinated tea, decaf coffee, hot cocoa, whatever you will. Tonight's going to be very laid back, and I'm going to be reading to you, I think at this point, 7 spooky tales. I wanted to pad this out. So, you will note blurps have been disabled, as well as every other command out there, so you get to build up some mementos for when I get back tonight. Without further ado, I think we can begin. We'll start off classic, and then move into more modern times, quote unquote. More modern meaning like 1800s. And no, before somebody accuses me of being aged, I died in the 2010s. I had to prove that last night while we were watching something. But yes. Welcome on in. Without further delay, I'm going to immerse myself in whatever the hell it is I'm reading. Which, to begin with, and there'll be no music, by the way, don't worry. No music, no eerie sounds. I couldn't pull anything together. It's just you, me, and the crackling of fire, and a PNG that only has 4 frames. So yeah, it's all about the recital here. Alright, enough stalling. Let's tear out my throat trying to narrate something. Now reading The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to such a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. Edgar Allan Poe is a very old writer, so his words may be going here and there to and fro. I'll try to be as clear and concise as I can. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally undressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in the wine. Few Italians Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gramarye Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk, one evening during the supreme madness of the Carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking too much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes to be Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of Carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied. "I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. And for those who don't know, Amontillado is a wine, a fine sherry, enjoyed by many. And if we're in Italy, well, you can assume that it's definitely made there, and in this time, refined using ancient methods passed down. A truly sought-after wine. Amontillado! I have my doubts. Amontillado! And I must satisfy them. Never had it, but I really hope to try it one day. Sounds like a good time to me. I'm not really a fan of wine personally, but I've seldom had much wine in my lifetime. I've had some store-bought wine. Moscato is my favorite so far. Interesting. Yeah. Fine spirits have eluded me across my lifetime. And afterlife, it seems. Can't exactly drink on a non-existent stomach. Amontillado! As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is match for your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vaults. My friend, no, I will not impose on your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi, I have no engagement. Come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado! You have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk, and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person. I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. I'm going to pray that my Italian pronunciation is on point because I've rarely ever pronounced anything in Italian. And I know the rules are a little bit different here and there. There were no attendants at my home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, once and for all, as soon as my back was turned. Man, I had to analyze this in one of my classes. You can tell just how two-faced Montresor is. Yeah, it's a good time. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe?" said he. "It is further on," said I. "But observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Niter?" he asked at length. "Niter," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be loved. To be loved. You are... Oh, I'm rolling around on this page. Give me a moment. You're a man to be... okay. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough!" he said, He said, "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True, I replied, and indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but should you use all proper caution, a draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps. Yes, he's playing on his pride, his pomp, his awareness that he is a greater man than Lucchesi. It's beautiful manipulation. Horrible to do to another person, but beautifully written. Here I knocked the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Yeah, no problem. He went back and watched. Spill the beans. God, when I have the time, because I have the VOD downloaded, I want to go back and clip that moment. Like, just snip it out. But it's so hard to, like... Yeah, glad you do. I'm very happy the VOD channel's doing his business. We just started, so don't worry. We're only in story 1. To give you a quick recap. Fiendish things are happening. You'll catch on soon. And if you can't, always watch... Do I need to make an alt outfit? Boy, you know the character better than anybody else. If you want to draw that, be my guest. All right. Here I knocked the neck off a bottle, which I drew from a long row of fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raises it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me in familiarity, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life." He again took my arm and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot d'or in a field azure. The foot crushes the serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune lasciat." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through the halls of piled bones with casks and puncheons intermingling into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. He's too drunk to know what that means, folks. That's a great observation. I paused again. This time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of this Medoc." Medoc? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I broke and reached him a flagon of the Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upward with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated that movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend," he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How so?" "How? You are not of the Masons." Yes, I said. Yes. "You... impossible! A Mason!" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a troll from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. And for anybody who doesn't know the Masons, I'm thoroughly surprised. Supposedly, the Freemasons are a secret society known throughout the land, with some origins, I guess, from Europe. I don't necessarily know exactly what they're about. All I know is that they're referenced very much by Kipling. There's probably some history my father could tell me. Yeah, the Freemasons. Just a word of advice, I wouldn't claim to be one unless you are. Secret societies may be more real than you think. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Yeah, not one here." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool behind the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again. I arrived at the deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. Heard of them, don't want to get involved if they're real. Yeah. Fun research topic. They're much like the Templars. I'm not so sure about their governmental influence, but I know they are deep-seated. Somehow. I just don't know the exact lore behind them. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior in recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no special reason in itself, but formed merely the interval between the 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of the circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi, he is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. In a moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet, horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand over the wall. You cannot help but feel the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied. "The Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among a pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began to vigorously wall up the entrance of the niche. "Hi, B. Welcome on in. We're reading spooky stories, and it's getting good." Yes, I know. I know, okay? I refuse to back down. We're about to end the Cask of Amontillado. Essentially, a friend has lured somebody here with a promise of... Oh, no problem. Yeah, be my guest. Enjoy your stay. But yes, to recap very quickly. Ooh, you do. Then I shall continue post-haste. As I said these words, I busied myself amongst the pile of bones, of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a loud and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and then the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the masonwork, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess. But the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight. My task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came out from the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be waiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor!" "Yes," I said. "For the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only the jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor, and I forced this last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. So ends the tale of the Cask of Amontillado. I hope I did that one justice. Whew. Okay. Where is my phone? There it is. Thank you. Thank you. It dramatic reading like that takes a little bit out of me, but I have fun with it. Okay. Looking okay on time. Not bad. Not bad. I would suggest double checking it to a beat video. I won't reveal what Tony sent me, but I would suggest trying to sync it to the beat I specified. Does look good though. Does look good. It's nice and charming. Okay. Now we're 40 minutes in, and we're only on the second story, and it's another long one, so I'm going to break it up a little bit by reading a poem about another individual who loves Edgar Allan Poe more than I. Now reading Vincent by Tim Burton. Now, anybody who's had a copy of Nightmare Before Christmas or maybe Frankenweenie, you've probably seen this little short. It was, of course, much to Mr. Burton's glee, voiced originally by Vincent Price himself. But I'm not Vincent Price. I'm just a humble skeleton. So without further ado, I shall give it my best attempt. And it is a poem, so it will be short. Then we'll probably have to go on ad break and continue with the next story shortly. All right. Here goes nothing. Vincent Malloy is 7 years old. He's always polite and does what he's told. For a boy his age, he's considerate and nice. But he wants to be just like Vincent Price. Though he doesn't mind living with his sister, dogs, and cats. Though he'd rather share a home. Oh, my mistake. Sorry. Gotcha, Tony. Enjoy the show. He doesn't mind living with his sister, dogs, and cats, though he'd rather share a home with spiders and bats. There he could reflect on the horrors he's invented, and wander dark hallways alone and tormented. Vincent is nice when his aunt comes to see him, but imagines dipping her in wax for his wax museum. He likes to experiment on his dog, Abercrombie, in hopes of creating a horrible zombie. So he and his horrible zombie dog could go searching for victims in the London fog. His thoughts, though, aren't only of ghoulish crimes. He likes to paint and read to pass some of the times. While other kids read books like Go, Jane, Go, Vincent's favorite author is Edgar Allan Poe. One night, while reading a gruesome tale, he read a passage that made him turn pale. Such horrible news he could not survive, for his beautiful wife had been buried alive. He dug out her grave to make sure she was dead, unaware that her grave was his mother's flower bed. His mother sent Vincent off to his room. He knew he'd been banished to the Tower of Doom, where he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life alone with the portrait of his beautiful wife. While alone and insane encased in his tomb, Vincent's mother burst suddenly into the room. She said, "If you want to, you can go out and play. It's sunny outside and a beautiful day." Vincent tried to talk, but he just couldn't speak. The years of isolation had made him quite weak. So he took out some paper and scrawled with a pen, "I am possessed by this house, and can never leave it again." His mother said, "You're not possessed, and you're not almost dead. These games that you play are all in your head. You're not Vincent Price. You're Vincent Malloy. You're not tormented or insane. You're just a young boy. You're 7 years old, and you are my son. Now I want you to get outside and have some real fun." Her anger now spent, she walked through the hall, and while Vincent backed slowly against the wall, the room started to swell, to shiver and creak. His horrid insanity had reached its peak. He saw Abercrombie, his zombie slave, and he heard his wife call from beyond the grave. She spoke from her coffin, make ghoulish demands, all while through cracking walls reached skeleton hands. Every horror in his life that had crept through his dreams swept his mad laughter to terrified screams. To escape the madness he reached for the door, but fell limp and lifeless down on the floor. His voice was soft and very slow as he quoted The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe. "And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Ugh. Sorry. I got really cheesy there. That's it. Vincent by Tim Burton. Rats. Sometimes it feels like it's working, sometimes it feels like it's forever, but work is hard. Take your time, Tony. Take your time. Like I said to you, nothing is impossible. Everything just takes time. Do your best, not the best. Let's see, what else have I got stored away? Good sip, thank you. I do have another good story, but I fear we may be interrupted. How long? Not terribly. If we have to, we can go to an ad break, but maybe if I read it without being distracted, no offense, it might work out. Oh boy. Speaking of Edgar Allan Poe, he returns with a classic, The Pit and the Pendulum. I'm not gonna lie, reading through this one was kind of difficult. Reciting it, not gonna be as easy either. Here goes nothing. Also, Tony, if things are harder to understand with me in the background, I understand if you have to get out of here to go watch some tutorials or something. Or if you want, you can just take it easy for tonight. Up to you. It's all good? Okay. Just want to make sure. We will be interrupted by ads, I'm certain. We're like 15 minutes. We might be able to snooze it out. Alright. Here goes nothing. The Pitch and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. And it starts with a quote. Impias torum longus hic turba furores sanguineus innocui non sat. Ooh, I can't read any of this. Ah, okay. It was something to be erected elsewhere. I'll ignore it, because my Latin is non-existent. Cool to read, though. I was sick unto death with that long agony, and when they at length unbound me, and I was permitted to sit, I felt that my senses were leaving me. The dread sentence of death was the last of distinction accentuation which reached my ears. After that, the sound of the inquisitorial voices seemed to merge into one dreamy, indeterminate hum. It conveyed to my soul the idea of revolution, perhaps from its association and fancy with the burr of the mill wheel. This only for a brief period, for presently I heard no more. Yet for a while I saw, but with how terrible an exaggeration! I saw the lips of the black-robed judges. They appeared to me whiter than the sheet upon which I traced these words, and thin even to grotesqueness, thin with the intensity of their expressions of firmness, of immovable resolution, of stern contempt of human torture. I saw that the decrees of what to me was fate were still issuing from those lips. I saw them writhe with a deadly locution. I saw them fashion the syllables of my name, and I shuddered because no sound succeeded. I saw, too, for a few moments of delirious horror, the soft and nearly imperceptible waving of the sable draperies which enwrapped the walls of the apartment. And then my vision fell upon the 7 tall candles upon the table. At first they wore the aspect of charity, and seemed white, slender angels who would save me. But then, all at once, there came a most deadly nausea over my spirit, and I felt every fiber of my frame thrill as if I had touched the wire of a galvanic battery. While the angel forms became meaningless specters with heads of flame, and I saw that from them there would be no help. And then there stole into my fancy, like a rich musical note, the thought of what sweet rest there must be in the grave. The thought came gently and stealthily, and it seemed long before it attained its full appreciation. But just as my figure came at length to properly feel and entertain it, the figures of the judges vanished. As if magically from before me, the tall candles sank into nothingness. Their flames went out utterly. The blackness of darkness supervened. All sensations appeared swallowed up in the mad rushing descent, as of the soul into Hades. Then silence, and stillness, and night were the universe. I had swooned, but still will not say that all of consciousness was lost. What of it there remained, I will not attempt to define, or even describe. Yet it was all not lost. In the deepest slumber, no. In delirium, no. In a swoon, no. In death, no. Even in the grave, all is not lost. Else there is no immortality for man. Arousing from the most profound of slumbers, we break the gossamer web of some dream. Yet in a second afterward, so frail may that web have been, we remember that not that we have dreamed. Excuse me. Slouching a bit. Let's see, where am I? There I am. In the return to life from the swoon, there are two stages. First, that of the sense of mental or spiritual. Secondly, that of the sense of physical existence. It seems probable that if, upon reaching the second stage, we could recall the impressions of the first, we should find these impressions eloquent in the memories of the gulf beyond. And what gulf is what? That gulf is what? How, at least, shall we distinguish its shadows from those of the tomb? But if the impressions are of what I have termed the first stage, are not at will recalled yet, after long interval, do they not come unbidden, while we marvel whence they come? This is such flowery language, and I appreciate every second of it. He who has never swooned is not he who finds strange palaces and wildly familiar faces in the coals that glow. Is not he who beholds floating in mid-air the sad visions that the many may not view. Is not he who ponders over the perfume of some novel flower. Is not he whose brain grows bewildered with the meaning of some musical cadence which has never before arrested his attention. Amid frequent and thoughtful endeavors to remember, amid earnest struggles to regather some token of the state of seeming nothingness into which my soul had lapsed, there have been moments where I have dreamed of success. There have been very brief periods when I have conjured up remembrances which the lucid reason of later epoch assures me could have had reference only to that condition of seemingly unconsciousness. These shadows of memory tell indistinctly of tall figures that lifted and bore me in silence down, still down, till the hideous dizziness oppressed me at the mere idea of the that's a big one. Of the interminableness of the descent. Golf clap for that. They tell also of a vague horror at my heart on account of that heart's unnatural stillness. Then comes a sense of sudden motionlessness throughout all things, as if those who have bore me, a ghastly train, had outrun in their descent the limits of the limitless. Wait, snooze? And paused from the wearisomeness of their toll. After this I call to mind the flatness and dampness. Then all is madness, the madness of a memory which busies itself among forbidden things. Very suddenly there came back to my soul motion and sound, the tumultuous motion of the heart, and in my ears the sound of its beating. Then a pause in which all is blank. Then again sound, and motion, and touch, a tingling sensation pervading my frame. Then the mere consciousness of existence without thought, a condition which lasted long. Then, very suddenly, thought, and shuddering terror, an earnest endeavor to comprehend my true state, then a strong desire to lapse into insensibility, then a rushing revival of the soul, and a successful effort to move, and now a full memory of the trial, of the judges, of the sable draperies, of the sentence, of the sickness, of the swoon, then the entire forgetfulness of all that followed, of all that a later day and much earnestness of endeavor has enabled me to vaguely recall. So far, I had not opened my eyes. I felt that I lay upon my back, unbound. I reached out my hand and felt heavily upon something damp and hard. There I suffered it to remain for many minutes. I strove to imagine where and what I could be. I longed, yet dared not to employ my vision. I dreaded the first glance at objects around me. It was not that I feared to look upon things horrible, but that I grew aghast lest there should be nothing to see. At length, with wild desperation at my heart, I quickly unclosed my eyes. My worst thoughts then were confirmed. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. The atmosphere was intolerably close. I lay still quietly, and made effort to exercise my reason. I brought to mind the inquisitorial proceedings, and attempted from that point to deduce my real condition. The sentence had passed, and it appeared to me that a very long interval of time had since elapsed. Yet not for a moment did I suppose myself actually dead. Such a supposition, notwithstanding what we read in fiction, is altogether inconsistent with the real existence. But where and in what state was I? The condemned of death, I knew, perished usually at the auto de face, and one of these had been held on the very night of the day of my trial. Had I been reprimanded to my dungeon to await the next sacrifice, which would not take place for many months? Oh, let me try that again. That was awful. I was stumbling through that. Had I been remanded to my dungeon to await the next sacrifice, which would not take place for many months? This I at once saw could not be. Victims had been in immediate demand. Moreover, my dungeon, as well as all the condemned cells of Toledo, had stone floors, and light was not altogether excluded. A fearful idea now drove the blood in torrents upon my heart, and for a brief period I once more relapsed into insensibility. Upon recovering, I at once started to my feet, trembling convulsively in every fiber. I thrust my arms wildly above and around me in all directions. I felt nothing, yet dreaded to move a step, lest I should be impeded by the walls of a tomb. Perspiration burst from every pore, and stood in cold beads upon my forehead. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable, and I cautiously cautiously moved forward, with my arms extended and my eyes straining from their sockets in the hope of catching some faint ray of light. I proceeded for many paces, but still all was blackness and vacancy. I breathed more freely. It seemed evident that mine was not, at least, the most hideous of fates. I've got no more snoozes. Tony, do you have any more? We're gonna have 10 minutes, but I think I might be able to time this correctly. I have not. Very well. I'll continue reading, and I know where to leave it off before the good bits start. Let's see. The agony of suspense grew at length intolerable. I moved cautiously forward with my arms extended, my eyes straining from their sockets, in the hope of catching some faint ray of light. I proceeded for many paces, but still all was blackness and vacancy. I breathed more freely. It seemed evident that mine was not, at least, the most hideous of fates. And now I still continued to step cautiously onward. There came thronging upon my recollection 1,000 vague rumors of the horrors of Toledo. Of the dungeons there had been strange things narrated. Fables, I had always deemed them. But yet strange, and too ghastly to repeat save in whisper. Was I left to perish of starvation in this subterranean world of darkness? Or what fate, perhaps even more fearful, awaited me? That the result would be death, and a death of more than customary bitterness. I knew too well the character of my judges to doubt. The mode and the hour were all that occupied or distracted me. Sip. My outstretched hands at length encountered some solid obstruction. It was a wall, seemingly of stone, masonry. Very smooth, slimy, and cold. Gotcha. I followed it up, stepping with all the careful distrust with which certain antique narratives had inspired me. This process, however, afforded me no means of ascertaining the dimensions of my dungeon, as I might make its circuit and return to the point whence I set out, without being aware of the fact. So perfectly uniform seemed the wall. I therefore sought the knife which had been in my pocket when led into the inquisitorial chamber, but it was gone. My clothes had been exchanged for a wrapper of coarse serge. I had thought of forcing the blade in some minute crevice of the masonry, so to identify my point of departure. The difficulty, however, nevertheless, was but trivial, although, in the disorder of my fancy, it seemed at first insuperable. I tore the part of the hem from my robe and placed the fragment at full length, and at the right angles to the wall. In groping my way around the prison, I could not fail to encounter this rag upon completing the circuit. So at least I thought, but I had not counted upon the extent of the dungeon, or upon my own weakness. The ground was moist and slippery. I staggered onward for some time, when I stumbled and fell. My excessive fatigue induced me to remain prostrate, and sleep soon overtook me as I lay. Upon awaking, and stretching forth an arm, I found beside me a loaf and pitcher with water. I was too much exhausted to reflect upon this circumstance, but ate and drank with avidity. Shortly afterwards, I resumed my tour around the prison, and with much toil, came at last upon the fragment of the serge. Up to the period when I fell, I had counted 52 paces, and upon resuming my walk, I counted 48 more. When I arrived at the rag, there were in all, then, 100 paces, and admitting 2 paces to the yard, I presumed the dungeon to be 50 yards in circuit. I had met, however, with many angles in the wall, and thus could form, at no guess, the shape of the vault. For vault I could not help supposing it be. I had little object, certainly no hope, in these searches, but a vague curiosity prompted me to continue them. Forgive the sound that is a cat. Excuse me a moment. Time is of the essence, and I am not ready to take a break just yet. And you may hear the cat again. Quitting at the wall, I resolved to cross the area of... Would you permit an ad break to feed cats? I have no idea. We'll see. We'll see if they go away. Cat break. Cat break. No, I think we're fine. We're fine for now. Quitting the wall, I resolved to cross the area of the enclosure. At first I proceeded with extreme caution, for the floor, although seemingly solid material, was treacherous with slime. At length, however, I took courage, and did not hesitate to step firmly, endeavoring to cross in as direct a line as possible. I had advanced some 10 or 12 paces in this manner, when the remnant of the torn hem of my robe became entangled between my legs. I stepped on it, and fell violently on my face. And there it is again. Just ignore it for now. Cat, please. I think it wants food. I'm not sure. But I'm trying to wait until the ad break. Sorry. If you hear another voice, it's my roommate talking to the cat. Barely hear it? Good. Good. Moving on. I have 3 minutes left to get to a certain point. In the confusion attending my fall, I did not immediately apprehend a somewhat startling circumstance, which yet, in a few seconds afterward, and while I still lay prostrate, arrested my attention. It was this. My chin rested upon the floor of the prison, but my lips and the upper portion of my head, although seemingly at less elevation than the chin, touched nothing. At the same time, my forehead seemed to bathe in the clammy vapor, and the peculiar smell of decaying fungus arose to my nostrils. I put forward my arm and shuddered to find that I had fallen at the very brink of a circular pit, whose extent, of course, I had no means of ascertaining at the moment. Groping around the masonry just below the margin, I succeeded in dislodging a small fragment and let it fall into the abyss. For many seconds I hearkened to its reverberations as it dashed against the sides of the chasm in its descent. At length there was a sudden plunge into the water, succeeded by loud echoes. At the same moment, there came a sound resembling a quick opening and rapid closing of the door overhead, while a faint gleam of light flashed suddenly throughout the gloom, and as suddenly faded away. I saw clearly the doom which had been prepared for me, and congratulated myself upon the timely accident by which I had escaped. Another step before my fall, and the world had seen me no more. And the death just avoided was of the very character which I had regarded as fabulous and frivolous in the tales respecting the Inquisition. To the victims of its tyranny there was the choice of death, with its direst physical agonies, or death with its most hideous moral horrors. I had been reserved for the latter. By long suffering my nerves had been unstrung, until I trembled at the sound of my own voice, and become in every aspect a fitting subject for the species of torture which awaited me. And sadly, I will have to stop it there, let the ads run, and we will continue the pit and the pendulum, along with whatever else may come. We'll be right back after these messages. How dare. How dare you! I'm kidding. I'm mostly kidding. You're fine. You're fine. Yeah, piercing seems like a lot of stuff to deal with. Like, if I recall correctly, you actually have to maintain your wounds and wash them regularly. But, you know, you sacrifice a lot for fashion statements. I got some math and a strange ticking noise I'm dealing with now. Yeah, yeah. Ah, good luck to you, B. Good luck to you. I can't speak from experience, but I know a couple people who have worn piercings. I'm gonna be real with you, homie, but sad and Panama will do it so pizzazz. Yes, you just described wearing dress shoes in a nutshell. B. Everybody has their own pain. All right. Let me go ahead and reset here, make sure everything is good to go. Man, the one thing they don't tell you about reading out loud like this is that your lips do get tired, as well as your jaw, your throat especially. So that's why I went ahead and refilled my water. All right. So it begins again. Yeah, piercing are less permanent than tattoos. Yeah. If your workplace or like your local, if your local like especially what is it? Onsens in Japan. They have a lot of them have a strict no tattoos policy because of how the ink can stain spring natural water. So yeah, having removable piercings makes life a little bit easier. And you still get to make a statement. Good luck to you though. Oh, hello, Dank. Hello. You are joining us in the middle of the pit of the Pendulum. Yeah, Yakuza Association as well, yes. By banning all tattoos, they banned the Yakuza from the onsen. And the Yakuza refuse to do anything without their tattoos. Forgive me. Alright, let's see. Where was I? Needs to see. I have been deceived. Truth at the length flashed me. Just return. Oh, okay. I'm over here then. Yeah, you shouldn't do that. I saw what happened to a certain other thing you own. You really should probably consider your items a bit more carefully. Anyway, that's what Twitter's for. And Blue Sky. And you didn't check those either. Kidding. Okay, good, good, good. Yes, I've been at this for an hour. I apologize. See, that's the only problem. I've heard that people are actually using Discords over, like, in-app solutions for notifications. It's interesting. All right. Before my throat gives out, let's continue. I'll start from here, just in case I forget. I saw clearly the doom which had been prepared for me, and congratulated myself upon the timely accident by which I escaped. Oh, okay, wait, no, I remember where I am. Decision, spirits, shaking every limb. The most horrible pain. That's right. Alright, this will bring you up to speed, Dank. The Pigeon the Pendulum sees us as a man doomed to death. We are currently trying to understand where we are and what we're doing here, and what death awaits us. As of right now, we have just fallen on our face in the dark and revealed to ourselves that there is a pit of water. Alrighty, Mims. Thank you for dropping by. The VOD will be up later if you care to listen to the rest of these stories. Appreciate you, and I'll see you within a week from now. I'm taking my Halloween break off after this, so just so you know, Ricky's going to be going on break after this, and he's going to get a new set of bones, as provided by Taboni Draws. So, enjoy this last view of the model while you can. Alright, continuing on. Okay. Okay. Shaking in every limb, I groped my way back to the wall, resolving there to perish rather than to risk the terrors of the wells, of which my imagination now pictured in many in various positions about the dungeon. You won't see it, don't worry. You won't see the rib cage. But it's not different. It's just brushed up. Resolving there to perish rather than risk the terrors of the wells, of which my imagination now pictured many in various positions about the dungeon. And other conditions of my mind, I might have had the courage to end my misery at once by a plunge into one of these abysses, but now I was the veriest of cowards. Neither could I forget what I had read of these pits, that the sudden extinction of life formed no part of their most horrible plan. Agitation of spirit kept me awake for many long hours, but at length I again slumbered. Upon arousing, I found by my side, as before, a loaf and a pitcher of water. No worries, Tonys. No worries, Tony. It can take another day. We've got plenty of time. And it's it's kind of a new avenue for you in more recent times, so take the time to learn, okay? Just chill. Grab a 40 or grab a cold water, take a seat. You've done a lot. You've done a lot today, especially. Agitation of my spirit kept me awake for many long hours, but at length I again slumbered. Upon arousing, I found by my side, as before, a loaf and a pitcher of water. A burning thirst consumed me, and I emptied the vessel at a draught. It must have been drugged, for I scarcely had I drank before I became irresistibly drowsy. A deep sleep fell upon me, a sleep like that of death. How long it lasted, of course, I knew not, but when once again I unclosed my eyes, the objects around me were visible. By a wild sulphurous luster, the origin of which I could not at first determine, I was enabled to see the extent and aspect of the prison. In its size, I had been greatly mistaken. The whole circuit of its walls did not exceed 25 yards, for in some minutes this fact occasioned me a world of vain trouble, vain indeed, for what could have been less importance under the terrible circumstances which environed me, than the mere dimensions of my dungeon. But my soul took a wild interest in trifles, and I busied myself in endeavors to account for the error I had committed in my measurement. The truth at length flashed upon me. In my attempt at exploration, I counted 52 paces up to the period which I fell. I must then have been within a pace or two of the fragment of the serge. In fact, I had nearly performed a circuit of the vault, and then slept, and upon awakening, I must have returned upon my steps, thus supposing the circuit nearly doubled what it actually was. My confusion of mind prevented me from observing that I had begun my tour with the wall to the left, and ended with the wall to the right. I had been deceived, too, in the respect of the shape of the enclosure. In feeling my way, I had found many angles, and thus deduced the idea of a great irregularity. So potent is the effect of total darkness upon one's arousing from lethargy or sleep. The angles were simply those of a few slight depressions or niches at odd intervals. The general shape of the prison was square. What I had taken for masonry seemed now iron, or some other metal, in huge plates whose sutures or joints occasioned the depression. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing, amigo. Let's see. Also, I'm not your great-grandpa. Come on! I ain't that old. I ain't 6 generations. It's a grandpa. I will refrain. Oh yeah, Rufus had his gotcha day today. Feel free to explain it, Tony, while I continue. And just... yeah. Let's see. The entire surface of this metallic enclosure was rudely daubed in all of the hideous and repulsive devices to which the charnel superstition of the monks had given rise. The figures of fiends and aspects of menace, with skeletal forms and other more fearful images, overspread and disfigured the walls. I observed that the outlines of these monstrosities were sufficiently distinct, but that the colors seemed faded and blurred, as if from the effects of the damp atmosphere. I now realized the floor, too, was of stone. Wait, what? Oh, I missed the period. Nice. Oh, that's sweet. Alright, let me try again. Figures of fiends and aspects of menace, with skeleton forms and other more really fearful images, overspread and disfigured the walls. I observed that the outlines of these monstrosities were sufficiently distinct, but that the colors seemed faded and blurred, as if from the effects of the damp atmosphere. I now noticed the floor too, which was of stone. In the center yawned the circular pit from whose jaws I had escaped, but it was the only one in the dungeon. I've got a list of stories. I apologize. And a lot of them, don't worry. All this I saw indistinctly, and by much effort, for my personal condition had been greatly changed during the slumber. I now lay upon my back, and at full length on a species of low framework of wood. To this I was securely bound by a long strap resembling a surcincle. It passed in many convolutions about my limbs and body, leaving at liberty only my head and my left arm to such extent. Yeah, I wish I could oblige you, but we've already gone well past what I expected. Besides, we're reading an Edgar Allen Poe story right now. And if you were hoping for Quote the Raven Nevermore, that was last year. Or I should say The Raven. Telltale Heart. Also read that last year. That was a good read. That was very, very emotionally engaged. Well, it's there on the live tab of Ricky T. Bone's channel, so feel free to check it out. I kind of got into it quite a bit. Alright, where was I? Okay, there we go. I passed in many convolutions about my limbs and body, leaving my liberty only my head, and my left arm to such extent that I could, by dint of much exertion, supply myself with food from an earthen dish which lay by my side on the floor. Yes, this was before Ricky was Ricky. Probably could, yeah. I am actually reading this from Enriched Classic Great Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. It's a book I found at Half Price Books, I think. Yeah, that was back when I was a deadbeat, exactly. Or using the deadbeat model provided by Jolly Pops. Let's see. I saw to my horror that the picture had been removed. I say to my horror, for I was consumed with intolerable thirst. The thirst it appeared to be designed of my... This thirst, it appeared to be the design of my persecutors, to stimulate, for the food in the dish was meat pungently seasoned. Looking upward, I surveyed the ceiling of my prison. It was some 30 or 40 feet overhead, and constructed much as the side walls. In one of its panels, a very singular figure riveted my whole attention. Let's see. It was the painted figure of Time, as he is commonly represented, save that in lieu of a scythe. He held what, at casual glance, I supposed to be the pictured image of a huge pendulum, such as we see on antique clocks. There was something, however, in the appearance of this machine which caused me to regard it more attentively. While I gazed directly upward at it, for its position was immediately over my own, I fancied that I saw it in motion. In an instant afterwards, the fancy was confirmed. Its sweep was brief and, of course, slow. I watched it for some minutes, somewhat in fear, but more in wonder. Wearied at length with observing its dull movement, I turned my eyes upon the other objects in the cell. Slight noise attracted my notice, and looking to the floor, I saw several enormous rats traversing it. They had issued from the well which lay just within view to my right. Even then, while I gazed, they came up in troops, hurriedly with ravenous eyes, allured by the scent of the meat. From this it required much effort and attention to scare them away. It might have been for half an hour, perhaps even an hour, for I could take but imperfect note of time, before I again cast my eyes upward. What I then saw confounded and amazed me. The sweep of the pendulum had increased in extent by nearly a yard. As a natural consequence, its velocity was also much greater. But what mainly disturbed me was the idea that it had perceptibly descended. I now observed, with what horror it is needless to say, that its nether extremity was formed of a crescent of glittering steel, about a foot in length from horn to horn, the horns upward, and the under edge evidently as keen as that of a razor. Like a razor also, it seemed massy and heavy, tapering from the edge into a solid and broad structure above. It was appended to a weighty rod of brass, and the whole hissed as it swung through the air. I can no longer doubt the doom prepared for me by the monkish ingenuity and torture. My cognizance of the pit had become known to the inquisitorial agents. The pit, whose horrors had been destined for so bold a recusant as myself. The pit, a typical hell and regarded by rumor as the ultima thule of all their punishments. The plunge into this pit I had avoided by merest of accidents, and I knew that by surprise or entrapment into the torment formed an important portion of all the grotesquerie of these dungeon deaths. Having failed to fall, it was no part of the demon plan to hurl me into the abyss, and thus, there being no alternative, a different and milder destruction await me. Milder! I have smiled in my agony as I thought of such application of such a term. What boots it is to tell of long hours of horror more than mortal. during which I counted the rushing oscillations of the steel, inch by inch, line by line, with a descent only appreciable at intervals that seemed ages. Down and down it still came. Days passed. It might have been that many days passed ere it swept so closely over me, as if to fan me with its acrid breath. The odor of the sharp steel forced itself into my nostrils. I prayed, I wearied heaven that my prayer for its more speedy descent. I grew frantically mad and struggled to force myself upward against the sweep of the fearful scimitar. And then I suddenly felt calm, and lay smiling at the glittering death, as a child at some rare bauble. There was another interval of utter insensibility. It was brief, for upon lapsing into life, there had been no perceptible descent in the pendulum. But it might have been long, for I knew there were demons who took note of my swoon. And who could have arrested the vibration at pleasure? Upon my recovery, too, I felt, inexplicably sick and weak, as if through long inanition. Even amid the agonies of that period, the human nature craved food. With painful effort, I outstretched my left arm as far as my bonds permitted, and took possession of the small remnant which had been spared me by the rats. As I put a portion within my lips, there rushed to my mind a half-formed thought of joy, of hope. Yet what business had I with hope? It was, as I say, a half-formed thought, and as many as such, which are never completed. I felt that it was of joy, of hope, but I also felt that it had perished in its formation. In vain I had struggled to regain it. Long suffering had nearly annihilated all my ordinary powers of mind. I was an imbecile, an idiot. The vibrations of the pendulum was at the right angles to my length. I saw the descent crescent was designed to cross the region of my heart. It would fray the serge of my robe. It would return and repeat its operations again and again, notwithstanding its terrifically wide sweep, some 30 feet or more, and the hissing vigor of its descent sufficient to sunder these very walls of iron. With still the fraying of my robe would be all that, for several minutes, it would accomplish. My goodness, it's getting tougher and tougher to read. Okay. Sip. And if you got some liquidation, feel free to have some yourself. I know, it's what it feels like, because I'm like, hydrate or dehydrate. In a way, yes. You just gotta start a recording of you just reading stories. What do you think this is? I don't know. At some point, I aspired to be a voice actor, but my living situation never afforded me the charity, I should say. Spooky bedtime stories. Well, that's what these streams are for, and that's kind of the niche I fill with this. It's a personal, like, what shall I say? A vain effort to do this sort of thing, but I digress. And at this thought I paused. If you need to sleep, Tony, it is coming up on midnight. I understand if you need to leave. And I guess I appreciate the compliment that my reading is somewhat soothing. But yes, if you do need to leave, this is probably going to be the last story, because I definitely overestimated how long these stories are to read. I have more, but I shouldn't. And save my voice. Let's see, where am I? And at this thought I paused. I dared not go further than this reflection. I dwelt upon it with a pertinacity of attention, as if in so dwelling I could arrest here the descent of the steel. I forced myself to ponder upon the sound of the crescent as it should pass across the garment, upon the peculiar thrilling sensation which the friction of cloth produces on the nerves. I pondered upon all this frivolity until my teeth were on the edge. Suppose story is a long as hell, dude. You gotta switch to something more chilled and do it. Let's see, how many pages do I have? Oh dear. I have 3 more pages, 6 more 7 more paragraphs. We're nearly done, don't worry. I may just end it after we finish this. But I do have one more story I do want to read, and then I'll call it a night. Don't worry. I won't be, Oh! Hey! Lixie! Good evening, good evening! For those who were intending on, coming to a exciting stream after whatever Lixie was doing, you'll be sorely disappointed. I am here reading books, and if you find books boring, then maybe put me on as you're falling asleep. I don't know. Hi, Lixie. For those who don't know, this is Lixie, a... Goodness, what is... You're here to chill out. Perfect, then. Perfect. Alright. Let me attempt to spell your name as best I can. I think that might work. Boom. That is Lixie, everybody. I believe... I don't remember what... I don't remember what your lore is at this point, but I believe you are a cosmic bunny girl. It's been so long since I've tuned into one of your streams. If you care to share with us how your lore is going, be my guest, because it evades me at this moment. I may or may not have gone to mush reading Edgar Allan Poe. But yes, welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. We are in the middle of reading The Pit and the Pendulum. It's getting good. Astral Bunny Go... For those who don't know Lixie, Lixie is an Astral Bunny Girl VTuber that will eventually become a CEO demigoddess. When I get my custom live 2D model. Yeah. I have a background in sales, Lixie. My voice can do many a thing. But yes. I don't know if this is going to be relaxing, but to anybody who needs to raid and run, I understand that. You very... Sheesh. Aw, shucks. For anybody who needs to raid and run, I completely understand. For those who want to stick around, it's story time. Alright, let's see. Oh. Wow, this is a great start. This is not going to be relaxing in the slightest. For those who don't know the story, we are currently seeing through the eyes of a prisoner trapped in Toledo. He is strapped to a wooden table, and a pendulum with an iron blade attached to it is slowly creeping down towards him. Down it crept. I took a frenzied pleasure in contrasting its downward with its lateral velocity, to the right, to the left, far and wide, with the streak of the damned spirit, to my heart with stealthy pace of the tiger. I alternated, laughed, and howled as the one or the other idea grew predominant. Down, certainly, relentlessly down. It vibrated within 3 inches of my bosom. I struggled violently, furiously, to free my left arm. This was free only from the elbow to the hand. I could reach the ladder from the platter beside me to my mouth with great effort, but no farther. Could I have broken the fastenings above the elbow, I would have seized and attempted to arrest the pendulum. I might as well have attempted to arrest an avalanche. Down, still unceasingly, still inevitably down. I gasped and struggled at each vibration. I shrunk convulsively at its every sweep. My eyes followed its outward or upward whirls with eagerness of the most unmeaning despair. They closed themselves spasmodically at the descent Although death would have been a relief, oh, how unspeakable! Still I quivered in every nerve to think of how slight a sinking of the machinery would precipitate that keen, glistening axe upon my bosom. It was hope that prompted me, the nerve to quiver, the frame to shrink. It was hope that the triumphs on the rack, that whispered the death condemned even in the dark dungeons of the Inquisition. I saw that some 10 or 12 vibrations would bring the steel into contact with my robe, and with this observation there suddenly came over my spirit all the keen, collected calmness of despair. For the first time during many hours, or perhaps days, I thought, it now occurred to me that the bandage or surgical which enveloped me was unique. I was tied by no separate cord. The first stroke of the razor-like crescent athwart any portion of the band would so detach that it might be unwound from my person by means of the left hand. If you couldn't follow all of that jargon, basically it means whatever's keeping him tied down is one singular strand. Take with that as you will as we continue. But how fearful in that case the proximity of the steel, the result of the slightest struggle, how deadly! Was it likely, moreover, that the minions of the torturer had not foreseen and provided for this possibility? Was it probable that the bandage crossed my bosom in the back of the pendulum? Dreading to find my feint and, as it seemed, my last hope frustrated, I so far elevated my hand as to obtain a distinct view of my breast. The surgical enveloped my limbs and body close in all directions, save in the path of the destroying crescent. Scarcely I dropped my head back into its original position, when there flashed upon my mind what I cannot better describe as the unformed half of that idea of deliverance to which I had previously alluded, and of which a moiety only floated indeterminately, though my brain, when I raised my food to my burning lips. Yes, we are using every anatomically correct term out here. Shush. Let's see. The whole thought was now present. Feeble, scarcely sane, scarcely definite, but still entire. I proceeded at once, with the nervous energy of despair, to attempt its execution. For many hours, the immediate vicinity of the low framework upon which I had lain had been literally swarming with rats. They were wild, bold, ravenous, their red eyes glaring upon me as if they waited but for motionless, on my part, to make me their prey. To what a fool, I thought, have they been accustomed in the well? Ugh. They had devoured, in spite of all my efforts to prevent them, all but a small remnant of the contents of that dish. There it is. There it is. I had fallen into a habitual seesaw or wave of the hand about the platter, and at length the unconscious informity of the movement deprived it of effect. In the voracity, the vermin frequently fastened their sharp fangs on my fingers. With the particles of the oily and spicy viand which now remained, I thoroughly rubbed the bandage wherever I could reach it. Then, raising my hand from the floor, I lay breathlessly still. At first, the ravenous animals were startled, and then terrified at the change, at the cessation of movement. Cessation, something like that. They shrank alarmedly back. Many sought the well. But this was only for a moment. I had not counted in vain upon their voracity. Observing that I remained without motion, one or two of the boldest leaped upon the framework and smelt at the surgical. This seemed a signal for a general rush. Forth from the well they hurried in fresh troops. They clung to the wood, they overran it, and leapt in hundreds upon my person. The measured movement of the pendulum disturbed them not at all. Avoiding its strokes, they busied themselves with the anointed bandage. They pressed, they swarmed upon it upon me in ever-accumulating heaps. They writhed upon my throat. Their cold lips sought my own. I was half stifled by their thronging pressure. Disgust, for which the world has no name, swelled in my bosom, and chilled with a heavy clamminess my heart. Yet in 1 minute, I felt that the struggle would be over. Plainly I perceived the loosening of the bandage. I knew that in more than one place it must have already been severed. With more than human resolution, I lay still. Nor had I erred in my calculations, nor had I endured in vain. I at length felt that I was free. The surgical hung in ribbons from my body, but the stroke of the pendulum had already pressed upon my bosom. It had divided the serge of the robe. It had cut through the linen beneath. Twice again it swung, and a sharp sense of pain shot through every nerve. But the moment of escape had arrived. At a wave of my hand, the deliverers hurried tumultuously away. With a steady movement, cautious, sidelong, shrinking, and slow, I slid from the embrace of the bandage and beyond the reach of the scimitar. For the moment, I was at least, I was free. Free! And in the grasp of the Inquisition. I had scarcely stepped from my wooden bed of horror upon the stone floor of the prison, when the motion of the hellish machine ceased, and I beheld it drawn up by some invisible force to the ceiling. This was a lesson which I took desperately to my heart. Every motion was undoubtedly watched. Free! But I had escaped one death in one form of agony, to be delivered unto worse than death in some other. With that thought, I rolled my eyes nervously around on the barriers of the iron that hemmed me in. Something unusual, some change which, at first, I could not appreciate distinctly. It was obvious had taken place in the apartment. For many minutes of dreamy and trembling abstraction, I busied myself in vain, unconnected conjecture. During this period, I became aware for the first time of the origin of the sulphurous light which illuminated the cell. It proceeded from a fissure about half an inch in width, extending entirely around the prison at the base of the walls, which thus appeared and were completely separate from the floor. I endeavored, but of course in vain, to look through the aperture. As I arose from the attempt, the mystery of the alteration in the chamber broke at once upon my understanding. I have observed that, although the outlines of the figures upon the walls were sufficiently distinct, yet the colors seemed blurred and indefinite. These colors had now assumed, and were momentarily assuming, a most startling and most intense brilliancy, that gave to the spectral and fiendish portraitures an aspect that might have thrilled even firmer nerves than my own. Demon eyes of wild and ghastly vivacity glared upon me in 1,000 directions, where none had been visible before, and gleamed with the lurid lustre of fire that I could not force my imaginations to regard as unreal. Unreal! Even while I breathed, there came to my nostrils the breath of vapor of heated iron. A suffocating odor pervaded the prison. A deeper glow settled each moment in the eyes that glared at my agonies. A richer tint of crimson diffused itself over the pictured horrors of blood. I panted. I gasped for breath. There could be no doubt of the design of my tormentors. O most unrelenting, O most demoniac of men! I shrank from the glowing metal to the center of the cell. Amid the thought of the fiery destruction that impended, the idea of the coolness of the well came over my soul like a balm. I rushed to its deadly brink. I threw my straining vision below. The glare from the enkindled roof illuminated its innermost recesses. Yet for a wild moment, my spirit refused to comprehend the meaning of what I saw. At length it wrestled its way into my soul. It burned upon itself upon my shuddering reason. Oh, for a voice to speak! Oh, horror! Oh, any horror but this! With a shriek, I rushed from the margin and buried my face in my hands, weeping bitterly. The heat rapidly increased, and once again I looked up, shuddering as with a fit of ague. There had been a second change in the cell, and now the change was obvious in the form. As before, it was in vain that I first endeavored to appreciate or understand what was taking place, but not long was I left in doubt. The inquisitorial vengeance had been hurried by my twofold escape, and there was to be no dallying with the king of terrors. The room had been square. I saw that too. The room had been square. Let me restart. 1, 2, 3. The room had been square. I saw that two of its iron angles were now acute, two consequently obtuse. The fearful difference quickly increased with a low rumbling or moaning sound. In an instant, the apartment had shifted its form to that of a lozenge, but the alteration stopped not there, and I neither hoped nor desired it to stop. I could have clasped the red walls to my bosom as garment of eternal peace. Death, I said, any death but that of the pit. Fool! Might I not have known that into the pit was the object of the burning iron to urge me? Could I resist its glow, or even that, could I withstand its pressure? And now flatter and flatter grew the lozenge, with a rapidity that left me no time for contemplation. Its center, and of course its great width, came just over the yawning gulf. I shrank back, but the closing walls pressed me resistlessly onward. At length, for my seared and writhing body, there was no longer an inch of foothold on the firm floor of the prison. I struggled no more, but the agony of my soul found vent in one loud, long, and final scream of despair. I felt that I had tottered upon the brink. I averted my eyes. There was a discordant hum of human voices, and there was a loud blast, as of many trumpets. There was a harsh grating of 1,000 thunders. The fiery walls rushed back. An outstretched arm caught my own as I fell, fainting, into the abyss. It was that of General LaSalle. The French army had entered Toledo. The Inquisition was in the hands of the enemies. And thus we survived The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe. Whew. Mother of mercy. There may be an ad sneaking up on us right now, but I do have one more tale to tell. I have no idea because I cannot see the warning. And I hear a cat scratching at my door. But that is the end of that story. Whew. Yikes. Okay. Need a break and then some. There's one more story, and I don't know if the ads are going to come in anytime soon. So we're just going to have a small little chat real quick. So, what'd you think so far? Enjoying the spooky season? Especially that. Like, I hope this month was somewhat decent. I know there was a lot of scuff. I know there was a lot of changes. I know there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. But hey, we made it through Spooktober, I think. Just gotta roll with it. Yeah, almost everything. That's good. That's good. You got one more week. And don't worry about what is it? Damn it, what is Dank, remind me what Percy's long gun is called? The So the pepper box is what you're looking for. But I'm trying to remember what the long gun is called. I know it has a very distinct name. Go ahead and take this down. hard to remember. But I do have one more story. Don't tease Dank like that. It's not different. It's just better looking, in my opinion. Ah, there's the ad break. Okay. Whew. Alright. Tell you what. We have one more story. My voice is sufficiently shot to tell this. Bad news. Yeah, that's right. Bad news. I forgot that. That's a great name. Okay. We got 10 minutes, so I got a couple of mini stories to read. We'll have one more break, and then we will finish off the night with a true ghost tale that many know. Let's see. Which one is short enough to read? I'm finishing the third season. Not gonna spoil it. I got pissed. Well, I've seen most of campaign 1, but I don't remember much. So this is actually a personal tale, if I can recite it to you quickly. Let's see. 26. Could I read this? No. Yeah, see y'all after the mini hiatus. Enjoy our time off, Tony. I'm sure there'll be more to do, but for now, I'm going to enjoy tomorrow as a free skeleton. So before we have our ad break, allow me to tell you about some local Texas legends, as compiled by Zinta Fowler. This is one I've actually experienced myself. The Marfa Lights. The road leading to Marfa, Texas, is said to be one of the windiest and the coldest in winter. The windiest... okay. The road leading to Marfa, Texas is said to be one of the windiest and coldest in the winter of any to be found in the country. And the town itself is noted for its ghostly lights, which appear from time to time to mystify even the hardest-shelled doubters of anything spiritual. At one time, there was an airport on Mitchell Flat on the outskirts of town. The lights began to be seen there with such frequency and with sometimes tragic results that the airport was shut down and the buildings abandoned. Marfa residents who claim to have seen the ghost lights say that they do not remain in one spot. They play around and flicker like a campfire. Sometimes they seem to race along the edge of the mountain, resembling a prairie fire. Since the first sightings early in the 1900s, there have been many efforts to pin down the lights and find out what causes them. Scientists and airplane pilots have attempted to get the lights cornered so that a logical explanation for their existence could be offered. All these efforts, though, have come to nothing. As is always the case with unexplainable phenomena, many legends have arisen about what the lights may be. Some of these go back to Indian days. One story arose after a party of Indians camped on the flat and were slaughtered by the U.S. Army soldiers. It is said that the lights are ghosts of the Indians that have stolen lanterns from the settlers. They are waving the lanterns about in hopes of luring someone to be killed for revenge. Good night, Rupee. Good night, Tony. Sleep well. Another Indian story says the chief woke up one morning to find that all the others of his tribe had vanished. He wandered about the countryside looking for his kinsmen, but never found any. When he died, his spirit continued the search, lighting the way with a lantern. A later story says that a cowboy was caught out in the prairie during a terrible blizzard. Ignore the cat in the background. I'll deal with him as soon as the ad break starts. Relax. You relax too, cat. He was certain that he would freeze to death since the snow was coming down like a blanket, and he couldn't see which way to go. Suddenly he saw the flashing of the Marfa Lights, and somehow they communicated with him to follow him. He was led to a small cave where he took shelter until the worst of the storm was over. When morning came, he found he was not far from his home. Many of the older folk of the town declared the lights to be friendly. Farm animals are said to show no fear of them. Some people say they are the ghost of a rancher who once owned the land and was a good and God-fearing man. The lights shine brighter on his birthday, they say. Others are equally certain that the lights are evil and have caused the deaths of many investigators who went looking for them. There have been reports that men traveling in jeeps or other land vehicles were either burned to death or driven out of their minds. Their cars were reported to have been found melted down as if by white-hot fire. It is also said that the lights have lured in pilots to die against the rocky faces of the Chinati mountain cliff. It is also said that the lights have lured pilots to die against the rocky face of the Chinati mountain cliffs. Some army men sent up a helicopter to locate the lights, disappeared when they landed in the spot where they thought them to be. Neither the men nor the aircraft were ever seen again. One thing is for certain. The appeal of the unknown is strong in the Marfa Lights. Many of the legends about them have been around for a long time. Others have sprung up from the active imaginations of the local teenagers, who find the lights to have a great appeal. The lights have also become a tourist attraction, with many folks traveling the long, lonely miles to Marfa each year in hopes of seeing them, and many do. And fun fact, as we were waiting for the ads to come, I'm one of those people. I've seen the Marfa Lights in person. It was strange. It was like dots of lights moving in a sequence, starting from the right and ending left. Hard to tell exactly what it was because we couldn't see it from a fair distance. But it was green, and then red. Someone took a photo of it when I was there, and the only rendering they got on that camera was like a drop of light, like a drop of rain on a window. It's hard to say exactly if what I saw was real or if it was staged, but all I know is this. I've been to Marfa, Texas, and I've seen something out there. Hard to say exactly what. So with that, we will take an ad break in approximately 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Maybe read one more Texas tale that I found very interesting. And end off with a classic ghost story that many, many Hispanics know. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and take a small break. Ad start in a little bit, but I'm going to extend this ad break so I can use the restroom, grab some more water, and take care of my cat. So, we'll be right back after these messages. Well, I hope you're happy. There's no more hotel. That's it. Hello, character select. We're in the void. Ignore the fact that you can see my lower half. There we go. Immersion unbroken. Oh no, I didn't see them. In fact, I'm speaking to you from the other side right now. So, feels a little chilly here, huh? Yep. Thanks. Now there's a hole in my cup, and yep, now the cup's gone. Great. Well, look at that, everybody. You've succeeded. On Halloween night, on Halloween week, Eve, you've succeeded in your task. And now there's nothing but the overlay on the camera. Anyway, I guess we're moving on with nothing. They buff Slayer? Oh god. Okay. I will look at the patch notes. Don't worry about telling me. Don't worry about telling me. I will look at them when I get the chance. For now, we're gonna move on and read the final story in the inky black darkness that's left the hotel. The other side? Unlikely. Unlikely. It's outside of your reach. In fact, I don't even know how I'm talking to you right now. I'm dead. You killed me. How does that feel? That you blew up dear old Ricky. And now, I'll have one last story to tell you. And then I'll have to go reform. Congratulations. You've succeeded. Feels great. Good. Good. Enjoy that. Because I can tell you, Dank, I will only come back stronger. Exactly. It's a process of death, pain, suffering, property destruction, death again. Are you sure about that? Because that would be killing yourself. Do you really want to destroy yourself, entering the void with me? If so, I can't stop you. See? There you go. Now all that's left is your consciousness. And look. Now everything is meaningless. And finally, you're not acknowledged. Much like a ghost. Like most of us are. Like myself right now. So, I guess without further ado, we can start our final story. Now this one is a tale passed down many generations. Used to scare little boys and girls into making sure they stay safe at night. No longer are we in the Texas Panhandle. This is throughout Hispanic heritage. This last story deals with La Llorona. And so we tell it here in the void, where she is, and where she'll always be. Now this is a verbal retelling of a transcript. So these words aren't all my own, but I will enjoy them I will recite them as best I can. Give me one moment. There we go. Voice is nice and clear. Also, some of it's in Spanish, so that might be an issue. So, What I'm gonna tell you. Wait, I need to fix some things. There we go. Anyway, congratulations on finally destroying the hotel. What I'm gonna tell you is the best known story in the Southwest. Not just the best known ghost story, but by far the best known story. Anywhere you go in Texas or Arizona or New Mexico or California or Southern Colorado, anywhere in Mexico or Central America, they know about La Llorona. It means the crying woman, the weeping woman, La Llorona. Of course, everywhere you go, they have a different story, and they will swear that the story happened right there, not some faraway place, right where you happen to be. So I've given up on trying to figure out where it really did happen. But people agree about this thing. It all started a long time ago, in a very small town. There was a girl living in that town who was so beautiful, people said she had to be the prettiest girl for 500 miles around. Some say she was the most beautiful girl in the whole world. And that girl's name was Maria. But because Maria was so beautiful, she thought she was better than everyone else. And she deserved the best of everything. She came from a good, hard-working family. They had a nice home. She had pretty clothes to wear. But she wasn't satisfied. She deserved much better things. And when she was a young woman, she would have nothing to do with the young men from her town or the villages nearby. They weren't good enough for her. Many times when she was walking with her grandma in the evening, the way young people used to do back in the days, she would tell her grandma, "Abuelita, cuando yo me casé, voy a casarme con el hombre más guapo y todo el mundo." Grandma, she would say, "When I get married, I'm going to marry the most handsome man in the world." And her grandma would just shake her head. But Maria would go on. She'd look out across the hillside and say, "His hair will be as black and as shiny as the raven sitting on that tree over there. And when he moves, he will be as strong and as graceful as the stallion my abuelito has in his corral." And her grandma would tell her, "Maria, caras vemos. Corazones no sabemos. Corazones no sabemos." It's an old saying. It means we can see people's faces, caras vemos, but we don't know what's in their hearts. Corazones no sabemos. And she would tell her, if you're going to marry a man, you be sure that he's a good man, that he has a good heart in him. Why are you talking about what his face looks like? But Maria thought, oh, these old people. They have old-fashioned ideas. They don't know anything. And she wouldn't listen to her grandma. And then one day, a man came to town. And he seemed just to be the man she had been talking about. He had been a cowboy out on the Llano Estacado. Yes. The hotel's gone. What can I say? We tried and tried and tried. Even though you all have your own special rooms. Even with your name on the door in gold livery. You couldn't help yourself. The hotel is gone. There's nothing else left. Not even I'm left. But let's continue. And then one day, a man came to town. And he seemed just to be just the man she had been talking about. He had been a cowboy out on the Llano Estacado. He could ride anything. In fact, if he was riding a horse and it got well trained, he would give that horse away and go rope him another horse. A wild horse, just for the challenge. He thought it wasn't manly enough for him to ride a horse that wasn't half wild. And he was handsome. All the girls were falling in love with him. He could play guitar, he could sing beautifully, and Maria made up her mind. That was the man she would marry. I told you how proud she was, so of course she would never let on. If they would pass on the street and he would say hello, she would just look away. He came to her house in the evening and played his guitar and sang for her. She wouldn't even come to the window. And before long, the cowboy made up his mind. That proud girl Maria, I can win her heart. I think I'll marry that girl. So things turned out just as Maria wanted them to. And before long, they were going to be married. Her parents told her, "Don't marry him. He won't make a good, steady husband." But she wouldn't listen to her parents. She got married. And for a while, things were fine. They had 2 children, and they seemed to be a happy family together. But after a few years, the cowboy went back to the wildlife of the prairies. He would leave town and be gone for months at a time, and when he came home, he would tell Maria, "I didn't come to see you. I just wanted to visit my children for a while." He would sit and play with the children. Then he would go off to the bars and drink wine and gamble all night long with his friends. He talked about putting Maria aside and marrying a rich woman. Well, as proud as Maria was, she became very jealous. And also began to feel jealous of her own children, because he paid attention to them, but he just ignored her. And one evening, while she was standing in front of the house with her 2 children beside her, and he came riding... Let me retry. And one evening she was standing in front of the house with 2 children beside her, and he came riding by in a carriage with an elegant lady on the seat beside him. He stopped and spoke to his children, but he didn't even look at Maria. He just drove up the street, and when that happened, something just seemed to snap inside of Maria. She felt such anger and such jealousy, and it all turned against her children. She grabbed the 2 children by the arm and dragged them with her down to the river. And even though it's a sad thing to tell, the story says that she threw her own children into the river. But as they disappeared down the stream, she realized what she had done. She ran down to the bank of the river, reaching out her arms as if she could get them back from the water. But they were long gone. She ran on, driven by the guilt and the anger that was filling her heart. She wasn't paying attention to where she was going, and her foot caught on a root. She tripped and fell forward, and her forehead struck the rock, and she was killed. The next day, they looked for her all over town, and they couldn't find her. Then someone brought word into the town that her body was out there on the bank of the river. They went out and found her, and they laid her to rest on the very spot where she had fallen. But the first night she was in the grave, she could not rest at peace. She was up and walking all along the bank of the river. She was dressed in a long, winding white sheet, the way a body is dressed for burial. They saw her moving among the trees, and they could hear her voice crying and crying through the night. Sometimes they thought it was just the wind they heard, but other times, if they listened more carefully, they were sure they could hear the words, and it would sound something like this. Ay, mi hijos, ¿dónde están mi hijos? Where are my children? She was crying. ¿Dónde están mis hijos? And she went all up and down the banks of the river, throughout all the arroyos into the mountains, down the ditches and canals and acequias. Night after night they saw her, but especially they would hear her crying outside. And so before long, no one spoke of her as Maria anymore. They called her La Llorona, the crying woman. La Llorona. And they told the children, when it gets dark, get back inside the house, because La Llorona could be around here looking for her children. And she's so crazy. If she sees you, she won't know if it's you or her own child. She'll pick you up and carry you away, or she'll throw you into the river like she did to her own children, and you'll never be seen again. And they say that through the years, many children have been carried away by La Llorona. One man even told me this. When he was a boy, he had a friend who did not believe the story. His friend would say, "Oh, that's a story parents made up to scare little kids and make them come home at night. There's no such thing as La Llorona." Well, the boys were down by the river one evening and it got late. The other boys all said, "Look, it's getting dark. We better get home." Not that one boy. He said, "No, I'm having fun. I'm going to stay right here." They couldn't believe it. They just said, "Aren't you afraid of La Llorona?" And he just laughed at them. "Come on! You don't believe that, do you? There's no such thing." So they went home. And he stayed there all by himself. He was throwing cans and sticks in the river, hitting them with rocks as they came by. It got really dark. And then the moon started to rise. Then all of a sudden, he felt like an icy cold wind was blowing through his clothes. And all around him the dogs were barking. He looked around, and there was a white shape coming through the trees and getting nearer. He tried to turn and run, but he was so frightened, he couldn't move. He just stood there, trembling. And the shape got closer, until he could hear the high wailing. "Ay, mis hijos!" But he couldn't run away. So he crouched down as small as he could. He just hoped she wouldn't see him. Suddenly, he heard her say, "Mi hijo, mi child," she said, and came toward him. His face was as white as the sheet the La Llorona was wearing, but he couldn't run away. She came up to him and reached with her long, twisted fingers as she took hold of his shoulders. When La Llorona's fingers touched his skin, it felt like icicles were cutting into his skin. Just then, when La Llorona was about to pick him up and carry him away, back in town the church bell started ringing, calling the people for mass. And when the church bell rang, a prayer went through the boy's mind. And when that happened, La Llorona dropped him, and she disappeared through the trees. He stayed there for a long time before he had the strength back. Finally, he was able to run home, and when he got home, his mother was angry. She said, "Where have you been? You should have been home hours ago." He started and stammered, Mama, La Llorona." She said, "What? Don't you go making up stories about La Llorona. You should have been home a long time ago." And she reached out, and she was going to give him a good shaking. But when she reached out to take hold of his shoulders, then she saw on each shoulder there were 5 round red marks, like 5 bloodstains. They had been left by La Llorona's fingers. Then she believed him. She took that shirt and washed it all over and over, but she could never get the stains out. The man who told me about that said when he was a boy, she would come around the neighborhood and show them the shirt. She would say, "Look here, you can count these. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those red marks were left by La Llorona's fingers. And when it gets dark, get home, because La Llorona can carry children away. And you can bet those kids in the neighborhood got home when they got dark." But I've never seen that shirt, so I'm not going to swear that story's true. And that concludes tonight's performance. Here, in the depths of darkness, I alone stand, waiting to be reconstituted after Halloween night. The show goes on. After next week, I want to thank y'all for staying up with me. I hope you enjoyed this little program. And I wish you all a spooky night and a wonderful Halloween. Take care, farewell, and as always, memento mori.